Hello everyone and welcome back to SiddTechnolog. I'm your host Siddharth Chauhan. In my last video I have shown you how you can use SSIS to script out objects from your SQL instance. For example, if I have to get a create table statement for this table, I have to do is right click on it, go to script table as, create to, and get a script in my new query editor window. I have also shown you how you can use the generate script task available at database level and all the options associated with it. In this video, I'm going to talk about a very important component of SQL Server, which is known as SQL Server Configuration Manager. You can simply access, like if I search for it, type config, and as you can see, SQL Server 2017 Configuration Manager. If you click on it, it will open a Windows MMC, and you will see your SQL Server Configuration Manager. The SQL Server Configuration Manager, in the left hand side, there are three major categories. One is for SQL services, one is for network configuration, and one is for native client. Now, the network configuration and the native client both are available in 32-bit and 64-bit versions. That's why I said that there are three major categories. Now, first, let's talk about if you click on SQL Server services. On the right hand side, when you click on the SQL Server services, on the right hand side you will see all the components which are currently installed on your system, or the components which you have selected. The configuration manager, as you can as I've shown you that we have selected SQL Server 2017 configuration manager, it will going to show all the components for the current version and all the components which were for all version lower than it. For example, if you had any components from 2014, they would have listed here as well. In this section, what you can do is that you can set properties for your services, control your services, as well as see any advanced option associated with them. For example, if I right click on my integration services, you can see that I have options for starting, stopping, and restarting. If I go to properties, I can set the account under which this service can run. So, for example, if you are in your production system and you want to define or assign a Windows domain account, you can assign it here. All right. You can also set any built-in account, which I would advise not to use for it because it may give an elevated level of permission which you may not want for it. Okay. Similarly, you can set few properties of your service. For example, whether you want to start it automatically, whether you want it to be disabled or manual, or want to start it manually first. For example, I have set manual for my start mode of this service. In advance, if you have any advanced option, you will see here for integration services, there are no advanced properties. So there is a blank page. Now, if I have to, now let's see what are the properties for my database engine, right? So as you can see, it is already running. So I have different options which are enabled. All right. Now let's go to properties page for database engine. Here you can see that there are 6 tabs which are shown to us. First is by default is logon, which I've already discussed with integration services. You can set an service account for your database engine service. Then you can set the startup modes for your service. Then the third tab is for file stream. In case you want to use file stream, you can enable this feature from here. All right. And what kind of name you want to assign, right? Similarly, you have a tab for always on high availability, right? So in case you are running with a Windows failover cluster, you can enable the option here. Then you have option for your startup parameters. Here you can add any parameter if you want to. In case you define any parameter, you can add that, or you can select any of the existing parameter and change the value for them and can update them. The sixth and the last tab is for advanced. What it shows, it has few options which can be modified. For example, do you want to enable error reporting, Do you want to enable customer feedback, or do you want to change the dump directory? As well as it also shows you few information about your instance, for example the addition of this instance. All right, so you don't even have to log in, or maybe you are checking any instance where you do not have access. You can check from its properties, from configuration manager, which edition is installed and which version it belongs to. For example, as you can see, it is 14, so it is SQL Server 2017. Okay, and the current version is 14.2027. Okay, the file version clearly defines the version which is currently on your system. As you can see, 14.02027.2. All right, so if you want to see the addition, see the version, so you have to check file version. All right, similarly you can set properties of all the services which are currently, all the components which are currently installed through your configuration manager. So I would strongly advise that in case you do want to do any changes with your services, please do it from SQL Server Configuration Manager, because it can easily get translated to your instances in case of any settings change, right? Now let's talk about what is there in SQL Server network configuration. So in SQL Server network configuration, if you can see that 32-bit, there is no collapsible menu because our instance is of 64-bit, so that's why there is nothing here. And in SQL Server network configuration, which is nothing is defined, it is 64-bit. As you can see, there are protocols for my instance. So whatever instances you have, you will going to see a list of protocols for those instances. On the right hand side, you will see all the protocols which any connection can use to connect to my SQL instance. For example, only shared memory is currently enabled. So any application which is currently running on the system locally will only be able to access this SQL instance. Okay. In case you want any application to access it remotely, you have to enable using TCP/IP protocol. Okay, which is currently disabled. So you can set it enable by right clicking on it, or even going to properties and setting it as no. In the properties, there is also an option to set your port for your SQL Server. So by default, as you can see, as we all know, that the default port number for SQL Server is 1433. In case you want to use a dynamic port, all you have to do is remove this 1433 and assign a 0 here, and from next time whenever you start using SQL Server, it will going to use it will assign a dynamic port and going to use that. In case you are using a dynamic port, then I would also strongly advise that you should ensure that your SQL Server browser services are also running. For default port, it is not required. All right, now let's talk about the third and the last section, which is the native client. So native client, again, here it is for remote connections. What kind of protocols you want to define for your native client currently installed in your system? For example, you can define the priority, that first it should try with shared memory, then TCP/IP, and then name pipes. All right, and second important thing which you can assign is aliases. So what are aliases? In case you are, for example, you want to connect a remote SQL instance which is maybe not on your domain or is only accessible through IP, but you want to access it using a dedicated name, you can define an alias for it. All right, for example, let's say I am creating a new alias for my system, so I'm going to define it as a predator. The port number we all know is default port 1433. The protocol I'm going to use is TCP/IP. All right, and I'm going to provide the loopback address 127.0.0.1 and click on it, and the alias is created. Now I can access my system using a different name, that is predator, which I just defined. Now if you directly jump back to your SSMS and try to access your instance, it will fail. Why? Because SSMS, if you know that it is a 32-bit application. Yes, even in a on a 64-bit system, it's a 32-bit application. As you can, and you can confirm this if you go to your task manager, you can see SSMS. It's a 32-bit application, and we have defined our alias where in a 64-bit section. So here, as you can see, it is not able to connect to it. It will going to give me a network related error that my instance, which I have just named, is not available. So what I'm going to do, I have to define the same alias in native in 32-bit mode. Alright, so whenever you are creating an alias in your 64-bit, I would advise that you should create it in a 32-bit mode as well. In case any application which is using a 32-bit mode, unless you are confirmed, it may be able to use that alias. Alright, now I have created this 32-bit alias as well. However, if I go back and still try to connect to it, as you can see, it is still not able to connect to my instance using the new name. Now what could be the issue? If you remember, we have created, so the protocol it is using is TCP/IP. So we have only two protocols which is available, name pipes and TCP/IP. All right, and as you if you remember that TCP/IP protocol is currently disabled. So that's why my SSMS cannot connect to this instance using the alias name. So I have to enable this protocol. Let me quickly enable it. If you change any of the option, enable, disable, or change any of the option through SQL Server Configuration Manager, you will see this kind of prompt that any changes made will be saved. However, they will not take effect until the service is stopped and restarted. Okay, so you have to be very aware to enable or disable any of the option in your production system, especially that they will not be come into effect unless you restart it and you have a proper downtime to do any kind of changes. Okay, whether it is the protocol enable, or even if you go here, let's suppose if I have to change, or if I enable file streams or always on, it will going to give me the same prompt. Okay, so let me quickly restart my services. As you can see, I do not have to jump back to Windows Services MMC to control my services. I can quickly do it here, and it is safer and it is a better option. All right, so my services are restarted, and you can see that state is running, start mode. Few of the basic informations are directly available here, and the new process ID has been assigned to it. And now when I try it, my alias name, I'm able to connect to it. All right, so that is it, guys. This is your SQL Server Configuration Manager, a very important component of SQL Server, which helps you control the behavior of your services and few of their advanced option. And it can also help you to troubleshoot why any remote connection is not able to connect to your SQL instance. You can check for protocols, and if you want to connect to a server which is not, maybe not in your domain, or maybe not directly available through your through name, and you want to use a name for it, you can define a alias for it. I hope you like this video. Please hit the like button if you like this video, and subscribe to my channel, and hit that bell icon to stay updated about all new upcoming videos. Thanks for watching today. Have a nice day.